Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Working in Hockey podcast. I'm your host, Nick Bowins, and as far as working in hockey goes, today's guest, he's done just about everything there is to do. Lee Elias joins us as a coach, a GM, a podcast host, an author, a speaker, the founder of Hockey Wraparound, and a bunch of different roles within the game that I'm missing in that introduction. Lee, how are you doing today?
I'm definitely working in hockey, Nick. No, I'm I'm doing really well, man. I appreciate that. It's like an onion when people ask me what I do, but you got most of them in there, so I appreciate it.
That's awesome. I think I'm excited for this conversation, Lee. Obviously, know each other a little bit here, but I want to get more into your background and kind of how you came up through these different roles, how you decided to pursue and carve some of your own paths along the way here as well. I think that's something that I try to preach a lot here on the podcast is, hey, maybe not something out there is for you. Let's make your own thing. So we're going to go through it all here. But first and foremost, I see the jerseys behind you there. We're recording this right after the Olympics. Let's talk big picture about the women's game, something that I know you're very involved in, coaching and otherwise there. How big was the Olympics for not only hockey in general, but the women's game as well?
Yeah, look, I'm real blessed to be, as you said, the head coach of a women's national team for Puerto Rico, and also my co-host on one of our shows, our Girls Play Hockey, is Haley Scamora of Team USA. So I'm always pretty humbled by the company that I get to keep, or I should say, maybe they keep me in their company. But what's amazing to me about women's hockey, Nick, and that victory means is that anytime they take the ice, they're trailblazing. Anytime they play hockey, there's someone watching that maybe not hasn't seen it before, but hasn't dreamed that big before. And to see them win the gold medal in dramatic fashion, the inspiration that provides not just young girls but boys too to get involved in the game and to want to grow the game is nothing short of inspirational to me, right? And look, I've coached a lot of hockey in my life, right? At virtually every level, and I can tell you that coaching this women's team and being involved with the women's national team in the sense of just knowing somebody there, it's been one of the most unique experiences of my life. I mean, like I joke like I look up to all of them and what they have to do every day. So the growth of hockey in the United States, we knew from the 1980 team what that did for us and how that's echoed through the last 46 years. I am so excited to see what these victories are going to do for the game and our country moving forward, right? And you could feel it right from the start. The videos of kids celebrating on their ice at youth hockey, stopping games, the celebration was there. And I said this to you in the pre-show a little bit about how you and I are in a unique position now as ambassadors of the game to help foster that growth. And I have a lot of gratitude for that, right? Not that I played in the game or did anything like that, but suddenly we're in a position here where this game's going to grow, and we're uniquely positioned to be part of that. And I'm humbled and so thankful for that. I think it's the coolest thing in the world to work in hockey, pun intended, but also not.
No, I think that's very well said. And, I'll credit a friend of the show, Jeff Merrick, who said before Four Nations and then again before the Olympics here that, hey, obviously he and I want Canada to win. That didn't
Right.
happen. But the best thing for the game of hockey is for the U.S. to come home with gold. And they did that. And I'm very excited to see what comes of these big victories for USA hockey and especially on the women's side. I mean, it's going to inspire generations. The pass down that we saw from Hillary Knight, from Cami Granado to now the younger girls on Team USA. And, you look on the men's side too, and from players that grew up idolizing Patrick Kane, like Jack Hughes said, to now you ask a youth player who their favorite player is, a lot of them say Jack Hughes, and he just
Right.
scored a golden goal, right?
100%. And look, I'll say this too. I mean this coming from a Canadian person. That's an amazing thing to hear. And I'll tell you too that the rising tide lifts all ships, right? USA hockey's been coming up for a while, but I don't want to leave out some of the other international teams from Scandinavia and Europe. Like they're up and coming too. It's not like the USA and Canada just flew into the final in either series, right? You can see that the game is growing globally. And again, from a unity perspective, the rising tide lifts all ships. Hockey is growing around the world. And I do agree with you selfishly that, yes, when the USA wins, it has a massive impact. But what a great Olympics overall, man. It was fantastic.
100%. No, I couldn't agree more. And We know there's been some negative fallout from the events, and obviously we're not here to talk politics, so we're not getting into that. But I think you and I both agree that we're hopeful that the story becomes the talent on the ice, the success these teams had, and we can continue to be ambassadors for the game, as you said.
Yeah, well, look, I'll tell you this in closing with that, remark is that when I saw those kids on the ice celebrating, and I've seen kids coming in the locker room with USA jerseys on, and I see the elation in the children, that's where my focus is gonna go. That's who I'm gonna focus on is that next generation who won't even care about the news today or anything like that, right? That's where I'm choosing to put my focus, and to support Team USA, all of it, right, to the best of my ability.
That's perfectly said. You touched on it there. Elated for the children and the fans of the game, and working with the Puerto Rico women's national team. Tell me
Mhm.
a little bit more about that role, Lee. How that came to be, how long you've been there, and give us a little peek behind the scenes at working with Puerto Rico's women's national team.
Yeah, it's a really quick, interesting story, actually. So, I became aware that Puerto Rico had a national program several years ago, and it was actually podcasting that kind of led me into this role. We talk about how different things lead in. So, obviously, I've been coaching for many years of my life, and I invited the president of PRIHA, it's called Puerto Rican Ice Hockey Association, onto my show because they had won a gold medal in an international tournament. And so, in getting to speak with him, he obviously got to know me a little bit, understood my team building kind of business and philosophy, and brought me on board to be a team builder. I was promptly promoted to the assistant coach of the men's national team. We won another gold medal there with at the Latam Cup tournament. Um, and then within a few years, I was asked to be the head coach of the women's team, and I jumped on that opportunity. And most recently, won a gold medal at a double IHF event in Argentina, at a 3-on-3 event, which is an amazing not just event, not just done by the IIHF, but moment for Puerto Rico hockey. And I think what most people don't realize about Caribbean hockey nations is, especially with Puerto Rico being part of the United States, our players all have Puerto Rican heritage, but are mostly trained in the United States. So we have a lot of NCAA athletes on the team, high AAA U19 players. So it's great hockey, right? I always love to tell people that, like, you'd be shocked how good the hockey is. But going back to what I said earlier, of we talk about trailblazing. Um, Not only do we have 100 women in the program, which means there's 100 women with Puerto Rican lineage that play ice hockey. That's amazing to me. But when they step on the ice, they're really inspiring anybody of Hispanic heritage. Again, rising tide lifts all ships, to get in the game and want to be part of the game. To be a part of that for me is the most amazing thing in the world. So again, it's a job. It's still coaching. You got to do your research. But it gives back so much more than I'm able to give it to it.
I think that's again very well said and inspirational to think about the number of people being, inspired, impacted, or otherwise by just seeing that there is a Puerto Rico women's national team and they are having success, and so on and so forth, like you mentioned. But how did you first get into coaching, Lee, both on the mental performance side as well as the on ice X's and O's side of things?
Yeah, it's funny. I started coaching in my early 20s, believe it or not. What I remember about that, which I was playing college hockey, and my coach came up to me one day and he said to me, Lee, I see coach in you one day. And I'll never forget what I said to him. I said, "There's no way I'm going to coach. I'm a hockey player." That was my response to him. And surely enough, a couple years later, I got into coaching just kind of some high school hockey in the area, right? And I realized it's kind of a dual story. I realized very quickly that I had a knack for team building and team bonding and team culture. That was really where my expertise lied. And so I pretty quickly became a collegiate coach after that. I think I was a collegiate coach by 22 years old, right as I finished my college career. So I was thrown into head coaching and GMing at 22, which gained me a lot of experience, did a lot right, did a lot wrong, right? Learned a lot. But as I navigated through coaching, you know, I really harnessed in on the team building, the team culture side of things. I wrote a book about that eventually. I was fortunate enough to coach in Europe, professional hockey in England, and just grow and cultivate. And it's funny. 20 years later, or probably a little more than 20 years later, the best part of coaching, Nick, is kind of understanding you don't know anything, right? You continually learn, and that learning endless learning is such a joy, right? Because the game continues to provide me with new things. We talked about how much the game has changed, right? If I was the same coach I was 20 years ago, I wouldn't be coaching, right? So it's been a wonderful journey of understanding where my niche is in the game, and then being able to formulate the team building stuff into jobs, into like this is how I approach it. Like yeah, I'm an okay tactician, but I have assistant coaches to help me with that. The team building is where I focus. That's how I created these opportunities, I think, for myself.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome perspective to hear, and cool to hear how early you got involved with it as well. I
I
think,
was young. Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. And like you said, you've gotten to travel a lot of different places, see the game in a lot of different places as well. We talk about kind of the growth of the women's game, the growth of the international game. Where were some of those different stops, or maybe random places overseas that you've gotten to see the game be played?
Oh, man, that's how much time we have. I mean, I'll lead off. Going to Argentina, Buenos Aires for a double IHF event was easily one of the greatest experiences of my life. Not just the hospitality that the double HF showed us, but it's international competition, and they had a 3-on-3 rink down there. Argentina was amazing at hosting. There were 700 people at the final game, which is a sellout in that arena. That was amazing. I'll never forget the first pro championship I won in England. It's at a town for anybody in the UK, it's at Coventry. And that was about 10,000 people screaming in to win. It was actually, again, this is deep cuts. It was Tony Hand's last game. So Tony Hand is the Wayne Gretzky of UK hockey. I'll put it that way. And we were playing his team, the Manchester Phoenix, and we ended up winning that game, which was a dramatic situation where the team I was coaching was selected to not even make the playoffs. So that was a pretty amazing experience. I loved coaching in the UK. Got to Scotland several times up there. But if you ask me now, I think it's not even so much location, Nick. It's like being with my kids, being able to coach my kids, see the enjoyment on their face and all the kids' faces. That's a really, again, not a location, but it's a nice place to be when you see that in a kid's face, right? Like, I got it, or I'm learning. And it's funny, Nick, because 20 years ago, if you had asked me, it's like, I'm going to coach pro, I'm going to be a pro in the game. Like, my whole focus is on kind of making it to the top of the mountain. And while I've been very blessed in working in hockey, today where I'm at, it's just the enjoyment of the game and being centered around that. I look for those opportunities. So I know that's a little bit of a trick answer to the question, but the locations I've been to are amazing. But being with a group of kids that want to learn or a team that wants to learn, that's my favorite place to be. I really mean that.
Yeah, I think that's what makes usually what makes a good coach, right? Is that genuine passion for not only themselves, but being able to help others, being able to teach others. Like you said, you're always learning yourself, but being able to pass on some of that wisdom. And
Yeah,
another way that you pass along some of that wisdom, Lee, is by being an author. Author of books like Think Like a Fan, How to Win, When Hockey Stops, Twig and Biscuit. I could go on, but tell the people how you first kind of got started writing, when you knew that was a passion, and how does one go about becoming an author?
that's a great question. So I've always had a knack for writing since I was young. In fact, when I was younger, my mom used to keep this book of like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And several of the years in elementary school, I didn't realize this till I saw it. I wrote writer, which kind of surprised me as I got older. But I've always enjoyed the process of being creative, right, in any form. So the way the book started is I was going to graduate school. This is actually kind of part of the working side of things. I went to get a master's at Drexel University in sports management because at that time of my life, I felt like, and this is my probably my mid 20s, I just felt like I needed something else within my resume at that time to kind of get me to the front of the line, if you will, right, with some of these job interviews. And my mentor there, advisor, convinced me that for my project, which is a master's thing, right, thesis, write a book, right? And I remember I said to her, I said, I can't write a book. And she says, why can't you write a book? I go, why can't I write a book? So I wrote a book. I wrote my first book. And, I got a great grade on it. And I'll never forget this, Nick. This is cool. I sent it to a lot of publishers and I got a lot of no's. Like you all have heard this story before, right? And I remember one more publisher came up on my radar. I remember thinking, all right, I'm going to send this to this person. And if they say no, I got to move on with my life, right? And they said yes. It was the last one that said yes. They published it. It won an award. So that kicked off my writing journey. And then I couldn't put the the pen down, if you know what I mean. I wrote uh, a book about my team building philosophy, which has been republished. It's got a second edition out now. And then I turned towards, believe it or not, children's books and helping young kids deal with adversity. And Twig and Biscuit, which you mentioned, I'm so humbled by this, is a top 5 book on Amazon right now in youth hockey books. Twig and Biscuit Learn to Play. We've started a whole series of books now. It's becoming a business for this introduction to the game. I call it the handshake moment. We felt that there was a gap between when people decide, hey, I'm going to play hockey, and they get on the ice the first time. So we tell stories through the rink rats, they're animated characters, obviously, of joining hockey, learn to skate, learn to play. And we could tell stories about how to get dressed or how to learn to skate or, dealing with not making the team that you want to make. So a lot of my focus is into that business right now of building this series and just I just love the joy of writing so much. So again, following kind of my passion and then having some great mentors that kicked me into it is how I got into that.
I think it's super cool, and I think you talk about with Twig and Biscuit there, kind of the introduction to hockey, and I'm going to get philosophical here, which nobody needs or wants, but
I
I
want
think
it, buddy. I want it. Come on.
I
Yeah.
think that's something I talk a lot about in our game, Lee, is we have top 1% fans who are diehard and they know every stat and every player and every hockey history thing. And then we kind of miss this middle section of early, kind of casual, introductory fans. Hopefully, again, things like the Olympics help educate people and bring them into our game more. But we have a lot of that top percentile of fan, diehard, super hockey fan who played their whole life. We don't have a lot of people who kind of get that introduction. There isn't a lot of avenues or routes for people to it gets better in cities and different areas, but it's hard for people to pick up the game at 20 or 30 and want to learn. Or like you said with kids, all my friends play it. I want to get into it. How do I start? So I think that that's super cool to hear as well.
Well, I'll tell you this too, that I've never understood the segment of hockey culture that has the ego of it's my game. Like I do like to say our game. I have no problem with that. But our game for me is whoever wants to be involved with our game, whether you play or not. If you love the game, you are always welcome in my office, right? You're always welcome on my couch. And I think that to grow the game, we can't have an attitude of, well, it's only meant for certain people or segments. Game's for everybody. And by the way, multiple versions of the game, street hockey, roller hockey, however you want to experience the game, it's the game. I'm thinking of a friend of mine, social media influencer, who just got into the game recently, and he's got a massive following and he had to make a video because people were ragging on him. And I wrote a comment of, I will walk beside you any day, whether you play this game or not, because you're clearly a fan. You are more dedicated to this game than most. And it's not a prerequisite to play or have played at a high level to love and enjoy this game. I think that's the toxic side of the culture that is in my mind, if we're going to use that word, right? So yeah, I want the game to be available to anyone, whether you're a Puerto Rican woman or you've been born into a hockey family. It's for everyone. I think that's just really important. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's very important, and I always say, as it pertains to working in hockey, the more people you get into the game, the more jobs there are, right? So it's
100%.
a win-win for everybody. When we have more people watching those Olympic gold medal games, we have more people coming out to youth hockey camps and tournaments. It's a win-win for everybody involved in the game as we continue to grow it. Another way that you cover the game and help grow it, Lee, is with the podcast. Obviously, you've got a very professional set
Oh,
behind
for
you
those of you
there.
watching, let me take a sip from my mug from my mug. Oh,
Oh, look
mm.
at that. There it is.
You got the Our Kids Play Hockey
The
mug. Yeah.
Our Kids Play Hockey podcast. How did that first come to light? And, obviously it's got a long track record of success now. You've even had some guests such as myself on there. But talk to me about the podcast.
Yeah, so the podcast started in the middle of COVID when we were all sitting at home and there was nothing to do. My friend Mike Bonelli, who is a coach he's obviously a co-host on the podcast. He's a coach in the Connecticut, New York area. Mike Benelli Hockey Solutions is his company. I realize I can name drop all the companies on this show, which is pretty cool. But Mike works in helping organizations grow. And a mutual friend, Christy Casciona Burns, who's a news anchor in Syracuse, New York. If that name sounds familiar to you, it's because she's USA Hockey Magazine's hockey mom. She writes all the articles. And we got together talking about finding segments in hockey that maybe were underserved and said, there's really no show for hockey parents. right? Like youth hockey parents. At that time, it was like, oh, the crazy hockey parent was the moniker that was bestowed on all of us. And my son at that time was just starting. He was about to be a mite. So the idea came up of why don't we do a show kind of documenting my journey as a new coach, a new dad. Mike's kids were about halfway through at that time. Christy's kids were NCAA college kids. So we had a parent from kind of each level of the game, and we started broadcasting. Now, here's the inspirational side of it. I remember that first year and getting 10 listens a week and thinking that was amazing. Right. But the first year, if you look at our stats from the first year, we didn't get a lot of listens. Right. And then all of a sudden, at the end of the first year, the hockey stick chart, again, pun intended, went up. And now we are regularly ranking the top 25 podcasts in all of hockey
Yeah,
6 years later. Right?
yeah,
So the show grew and grew and grew. And when we said, man, there has to be an audience out there of hockey parents, boy, did we find that audience. I think what makes the show really successful is that, we're just, having the conversations that we wish more people would have. We love it when the audience contacts us. We get emails all the time. Can you talk about this? Can you talk about that? And then as the show grew, Nick, to your point, the guests that we got grew. We've had NHL GMs, NHL players, alumni, Olympians. Our co-host on the show, because the show expanded beyond Our Kids Play Hockey into 4 different shows on the network. Obviously, Our Kids Play Hockey being the flagship, but there's Our Kids Play Goalie. There's the Ride to the Rink, which is a show we do specifically to kids. It's only 10 minutes long. And then Our Girls Play Hockey, in which our co-host is Haley Scamora of Team USA. Right. So it started as this little idea based on the book of one of my co-hosts, My Kids Play Hockey. That's what Christy wrote. And it has turned into a top podcast in the world because we get listens across the world in hockey. And then I would venture to say probably the top podcast for the topic of hockey, youth hockey, and parents and things like that. So um, amazing journey. Again, it's working in hockey, right? Like yes, we have done a really good job of finding partners and sponsors for that show, and growing that into a business on its own while maintaining, the laurels that we set at the beginning. So it just shows you. You mentioned it's like the books that I've written, the podcast. I know we're going to talk about some other things. Like a lot of these originated just from an idea and a belief that we could do it, right? And not waiting around for someone to do it for us. So, yeah, I'm so proud of that show. I love doing it. And again, we talked about being ambassadors for the game. When we get emails from people, and again, hey, your show helped us, or I have this question. Boy, is that humbling and wonderful. And the last one I'll tell you, because I got to talk about this one all day. We got an email recently from someone in Washington State. We talk a lot about how rec hockey should really make a comeback and little less structured in terms of youth hockey. This guy built a rec league, a wildly successful rec league in Washington State, and he's telling us like, you inspired that. Your show inspired me to do. My goodness, I mean, I was blown away by it. The guy created a whole hockey league, you know, and it's working. Um, that's an amazing outcome. But yeah, again, I'm going a lot of different directions. That show has been one of my favorite things to do.
I completely hear you. I think it's one of my favorites to listen to, and I highly suggest anybody check it out if they haven't yet. Like you said, such a wide range of guests and perspectives and stories, and like you said, it's kind of an underserved audience or market. I can go find a million shows that'll talk about today's trades and last night's scores, but
Yeah,
to get a different perspective to our game is super important, and that's one thing you've done really well with all your initiatives, Lee. Is find those different areas that are lacking or underserved or otherwise, whether it's writing, whether it's the podcast, or whether it's coming up with hockey wraparound.
right,
Nice
right.
little segue there, but
Well done.
the idea. Tell me how the idea for hockey wraparound came up, and what the early days of building that company was like. Because I think it's a name most, if not everybody, listening to this show right now has known, seen, and probably used.
Yeah, if there's a flagship to the entire operation, it's definitely a hockey wraparound, and it's funny, Nick. Now that we're talking about it, I do see it. You kind of, I didn't really realize it till right now, but there's a little bit of a trend of creating something from nothing here, or ideas, and it's based in this idea of, boy, I wish I had that when I was a kid, or seeing that there's a gap in the market. I think I'm very attracted to things like that. If someone should do something about that, so wraparound is no different. I was this story actually goes way back to when I was a kid. So there were no real training aids when I was a kid. All right. I take everybody back to the mid 90s. Composite sticks are still kind of a couple years away. You might be using a wooden stick or a two-piece. Man, I'm starting to sound old. This really sounds crazy. But there were no training aids. So my dad took me to the hardware store. We got a piece of sheet metal and a bottle of WD-40, and I sprayed it on there. I got a bunch of pucks, and I had a shooting pad. I'm going to try and say it again. Like, this is not a thing people did back then. I was obsessed with the game in training and things like that. And I put paper plates up on the net as targets. Right. This is what I was doing when I was 16 years old. Um, Maybe the occasional N64 game at that time. But as I got older, the idea came of, well, what if we could wrap that sheet metal around the stick, and then I could play anywhere.
Mhm.
That's kind of where the idea originated from. The very first hockey wraparound, which again, for those you know, is a blade protector, right? So you can use your ice hockey stick outside, was a piece of sheet metal that we crafted and cut, and it worked okay. The first one worked very okay. I always like to tell people we had a pretty high break rate on the first one. It failed a lot, but you know what? We replaced every one, and we kept getting better and better and better. I'm telling this to anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur, that sometimes you just got to get something out there. All right, a 40% break rate, which the very first wraparound had, is very high. Okay, but we kept getting it better, and then eventually the steel one worked pretty darn good. And then we started to work on what would put us on the map, was our current version, which is a privately formulated plastic. It's not just plastic, right? There's a lot of stuff in there. I'm not going to tell you guys how to make it. You can go get one. But the idea is that it forms to your stick. It enhances the surface you're on. We really got this thing, and we went from a 40% break rate to a probably 0.001 break rate when this plastic one was invented and patented and all this stuff. And that was a 4-year journey to get there. And then the company has expanded now. We sell the puck around, which is our newest product, which is an off ice puck, which is the same weight and size as a puck. But you're seeing here is like we're trying to fill in the gaps in the off ice training segment. Protect your ice hockey stick. I wanted to play with the stick I was using in games. That's where the idea came with. With the puck around, there's a lot of great off ice puck options, and I'm not even poo pooing on them. But I wanted a puck that was like a puck, that flew like a puck, that maybe I could shoot without breaking, right? So we invented that, right? And then there's other products involved. I mean, I'll go on forever. You can tell I love what I do. But the idea is it came from a necessity. There was a need. B, it came from, well, I'll call it reckless love for the game of, I'm going to make this work, right? You just get something out there. It's MVP, minimal viable product. And then my team is probably the biggest part of the success, is that I'm really surrounded by amazing people at this company that, there's this statement that no one cares about the company as much as the owner. I found people that care about this company probably as much, if not more than me sometimes, which was part of the success. And then, if I may, the last thing I'll tell you, I'm talking a lot,
No, I
was
love it.
that one of the most amazing moments. There were two that I have coming to my mind. I remember one Christmas early on, the person we were using for shipping at the time, who we don't use anymore, lost half of our inventory 2 weeks before the holiday. This is a catastrophic situation for those of you who don't understand. We're not going to have inventory for Christmas. And we had already sold, I think at that time, again, it's not what we do way more today, but I think it was like, if we had 500 units we couldn't ship. I mean, that's significant revenue. All
Mhm.
right. So it's a business killer, right? And I remember, I've always been about not doing what's apropos. So what normal businesses might do is just send one big email to everybody of, hey, it's not coming, sorry. We emailed everyone, all 500 people, one at a time, individually. It was not a big spam email. And we basically took accountability, even though it wasn't necessarily our fault, but we took accountability and said, hey, look, it's not going to be there. We really apologize. Here's 3 options. So we can wait and send it to you when they come in. We can send you an alternative product, or we can refund you. And I was terrified. I just remember thinking, this is going to put us under. And the most amazing thing happened, Nick. We started getting emails back of, it's really impressive that you took the time to email me and tell me this thing. It's really refreshing that you did this. Not only did we keep 98% of the sales, but every one of those people told somebody else about the company. And we grew really quick from this catastrophic situation just because we cared, I guess would be the right word. And then fast forward to not a great time, but COVID. So much of business, man, so much of business is timing. And not that COVID is wonderful or anything like that, but every rink in the world shut down, and suddenly there was a tremendous need for this product that we had built, the wraparound, right? And I remember being told at that time, "Well, you're lucky." And I'm like, first off, there's nothing lucky about what's happening in the world right now. Like, so let's not ever use that word. I said, no, we were prepared. We built a business up for at that point 5 years. I mean, we're over, I think, 12 years old now. And we were in a position, and this is what I love about it. We were in a position to help people play hockey when there was no hockey. And that was a responsibility to us. But I think that COVID, in addition to that other story, is really what put us globally on the map. The Christmas story boosted us in North America. But after COVID, I mean, the wraparounds are all over the world. It's been copycatted a billion times, which is another part of business, which I won't get into. But where I sit today, just to kind of close this out, especially with the wraparound product, I think it's the coolest thing in the world that my team and I invented something that has since been adopted by competitors. I'll say it like that, but it didn't even exist. Like, we created a whole new market in the game. That blows my mind. I think it's the craziest and coolest thing in the world. And when I wake up every day, yeah, look, I have bad days like everybody, but there's never a day I wake up not thankful that I'm doing what I do, ever. Like there are so many other jobs out there that I know people don't enjoy doing their work, and they have to do it. They have to put food on the table. I think of them. They anchor me. They're the people fighting overseas, the military. Like, I think about all these people when I wake up. I really mean this, and I just say thank you, and I go to work because I get to work in the greatest sport in the world, right? And again, when I say work in the sport, again, I'm an entrepreneur. I've worked at the NHL. I have worked in pro hockey. I've been around the block in terms of the hockey world, and I've just nothing but gratitude for it. Sorry, not to get sentimental, but now you're
No,
making me
that's
think
perfect.
about it.
That's perfect. I mean, I think it's very impressive to take something that, again, didn't exist or wasn't a thing yet and turn that into, more than a viable business in hockey. Because I mean, I hear it all the time, and you do too, Lee. People say the hockey world's too small. You can't make that happen XYZ reason, but the hockey world's too small. There's not enough of a market for that. There's not enough of an audience for that. And I think, hockey wraparound, as well as all your other endeavors, speak to quality and care and passion can go a long way in a game that is a small game comparatively, right? Those things can go a very long way. You mentioned your role with the NHL there as well. That was, one other spot I wanted to take us to there, Lee. Again, obviously, entrepreneurial spirit and, done a lot of things on your own, but you have worked for the biggest league, and,
I
it's
did right in Manhattan.
tell us a little bit about your role there, coordinator of programming and production. Tell us about your experience working for the NHL.
Yeah, well, let's start from the interview process, and we'll go through it. So, high stakes interviews, right? And it's one of those interviews you're going to do 2 or 3 rounds of interviews before you're even considered for the job. So I remember applying for that job, and it was not the first time I applied for a job at the NHL. My first time applying, I actually got rejected. I didn't even get an interview. And for those of you that are younger listening, I remember at that time, I was so hurt by that, right? I was so hurt by that. I was a little too immature to understand how the real world works at that time, right? And I remember thinking, I think some of the audience will relate to this, of I'm the biggest hockey fan in the world. How could they not even interview me? It was all ego. It was all completely ego from me. And what I did do right was go, "Oh, I'm not going to stop here. I'm going to be resourceful. I'm going to keep trying." Like, it didn't shut me off to trying to work in hockey. And the way I got the second interview was, again, it's not pre-internet, but it's pre-social media at this time. Okay. And I was working at a rink, surprise, coaching. And I remember on the desk of one of the people at the rink was an NHL business card. And I saw the NHL logo, and it was a name and an email. No idea who the guy is. No idea what he does. But I wrote down this email, and, kind of secretly, but I wrote it down and emailed him. I said, "Hey, my name is Lee Elias. You don't know me, right? I want to work in hockey. Can I take you out to lunch?" Swear, that's exactly how I did it. And he responded, and he said, "Yeah." And he invited me to the NHL headquarters. I mean, this is really how this went. And that's how I got my name in the hat for this programming of production job. So I did the interviews. I got the job. I will tell all of you, I found out later, I'm saying this again with such gratitude. I was one of 2,500 applicants, right? And they chose me. And I'm telling you that because the first time I didn't even get the interview, and then they chose me. All right. So it just shows you you don't stop. You don't give up ever, right? You keep pushing. And my main job, I have a broadcasting degree, undergraduate from Montclair State University. That's where I went for that. So this is the realm I was in at the NHL, was launching the NHL network in the United States. So the year's 2007, and the NHL network, believe it or not, kids, was not in the United States at that time. It was in Canada, and it was in 4:3, which means it wasn't even widescreen yet. All right. So we did a lot of work with creating air schedules, creating content. I directed NHL Live for several years, the show that's still on the TV today. And I worked with the team to launch NHL Network in the United States. And I learned a lot at that job. I will tell you that waking up and walking to work in Midtown Manhattan every day, going to the NHL headquarters, is one of the coolest feelings in the world. So I loved the work, right? But had to learn to work with people. You want some realities of the work world? Not everybody that works at the NHL is a hockey fan. That shocked me, right? Some of them are there to do a job, and it's not that some of them don't even like hockey, at least when I worked there. Not, I don't know if that's still true, but I think that's anywhere you go, right? You're going to find people from different walks of life. So that was a bit of a shock. And then I'm going to say this again too. Like I'll tell you guys everything. I had to check my own ego at points too, right? When you're working at the NHL, I was also coaching college hockey at the time. You start to feel like you're on top of the world a little bit. All right. And I had to check myself at times of, hey man, you're one of a lot of people working here, and maybe don't have an attitude about that. Don't think you're special, and because life will humble you if you don't. So a lot of learning at that time. But amazing place to work. I can't gush enough about the NHL and the honor that it was to work there, right? Um, I don't brag about working there, but when it does come up, I do say, like, what an honor to have been at that office and, like, been in rooms with Gary Bettman walking around. Like these people just walk around. It's the headquarters, right? So that was pretty cool.
Yes, I think that's phenomenal insight for people to hear, and again, valuable perspective from somebody who's been a company of one, trying to make ends meet, and somebody who's been at the biggest company in the
Yeah.
game. So
Yeah.
I think that's very valuable. And like you said, 2,500 applicants, and I would
It's amazing.
willingly wager that there's a lot more than that today because people like working in hockey share jobs publicly
Well,
online.
yeah.
But like you said, people can't get discouraged by that. I mean, a lot of times they don't make it through every resume. And is that fair always? I don't know. Hard to say.
But that's
But
why you got
that's
to
the
keep going.
reality of the world, right? Is, a lot of these roles are getting 5, 10,000 applicants, and you need to find ways to stick out, whether that's writing down an email from an errant business card, bumping into somebody on the street, or any way that you can get your name, face, and personality in front of somebody there, right?
Well, and Nick, look, I'll say this too, kind of quote Avengers here, like, experience is experience. All right. And I try and tell, especially the younger people trying to get in the game, don't get so caught up with, I've got to work with the NHL, or I got to work with the NHL team. All right. If you get to do that, fantastic. Get caught up with, I want to work in hockey. Get caught up with that. Nick, what you do is so amazing because you have offered everybody the opportunity to see what's out there. And I've told you 100 times, I would have done anything for your newsletter and your stuff when I was a kid. I mean, what an amazing resource, right? We had to do that on our own. Like, we had to scour the internet on our own back then and see what you could find. I mean, it's never been easier to find work in hockey, but experience is experience. If you want to work in the game, get a job in the game. And I'm going to tell you this too. You may have to volunteer if you're serious, especially with coaching. You might have to volunteer for a few years, but get the experience, right? Because if you really want this to happen, it's not easy. You got to put the time in. You got to put the work in. Doesn't matter if you're the biggest hockey fan in the world. That's not a prerequisite. The drive and the determination and the belief in yourself and the failing and the no's and the no's and the no's, those are going to happen, right? So if you want to work in hockey, work in hockey. All right. Because if your goal is just to be able to say, hey, I worked for the NHL, or I worked for this NHL team, to me, that's actually a pretty small goal, right? It's an honorable one. Don't get me wrong. But you and I are part of the bigger hockey collective out there, right? Like we get to be ambassadors to the game. There's no higher calling than that. And you don't need NHL on your business card to achieve that. Okay. I'm going to say it again. I'm not saying that's not a worthy pursuit to anybody who wants that. If that's what you want, go get that too. But working in hockey is such a gift. Like someone picks up my garbage twice a week, right? And I don't look down on those guys in any way, but that's a job, right? I could be doing that, right? I'm not. I'm in an office with hockey jerseys around me. It's a gift, but you got to be willing to move forward. You got to take the breaks. Getting jobs, losing jobs, and if you love it enough, you can make it work for yourself.
And similar to like we said before with again the podcast, hockey wraparound, the books. Sometimes you got to go in a direction that others aren't. Sometimes you have to find that underserved or underapplied to job, and maybe that's reaching out to hockey wraparound or working in hockey or whoever it may be. If that NHL job doesn't open up, right? There's a million ways to find jobs within our game, and I'm glad you spun it in that direction, Lee, because
Oh,
I think that's
there
very
is.
important for people to hear. There's a million ways to make a living, be happy, and find fellow people who love the game. But Lee, this has been awesome here. I always wrap up by asking about career advice, but I'm going to split it into two questions for you. First, more on the entrepreneurial side of things. For anybody looking to build a business or be entrepreneurial in sports, what sort of advice and life lessons could you give there, Lee?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, Nick, because I was literally just thinking about that. You know, there's two pieces of advice here. Okay, one is the realization a good idea is not worth that much. There's no shortage of good ideas out there. Okay. What is worth a lot is someone willing to take that idea and turn it into something big. Okay. So if you are an entrepreneur out there, you want to be, and you've got a great idea, and listen to when your voice says, I wish I had that when I was a kid. Listen when your voice says, man, there's no one doing X, Y, and Z. Do your research. Make sure that you're right. Just because you thought of it doesn't mean it hasn't been done. Look at the market and then have the guts, if you can, to go for it. And know this as an entrepreneur, you are going to be jumping off a cliff if you want to be an entrepreneur, metaphorically. Okay. What I always advise people is know how deep the jump is and make sure you can survive if you make the jump. Okay. But you're going to be jumping off a cliff to start a business. All right. And the ones that have the guts to do this actually typically succeed. But the idea is not enough. The idea is not worth that much, right? I know I'm talking to a guy who had an idea of why don't we just aggregate all the jobs in one place? He's turned that into a business for himself. I'm sure there was some scary moments, Nick, when you did this, right? Where it was like, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but you did it. So an idea, you got to have some grit. What I love about hockey is if you're listening to this, you probably have some grit. You probably played the game or you probably know the game, right? And you got to be willing to take a leap and take that risk. And I'll tell you that even if you don't succeed, you'll get so much further down the line than if you didn't try at all. Nick, I can't tell you how many businesses I've had that have not worked. Like we talked about all the successes today. All right, I've got several businesses that did not work. All right, but you learn from them, you apply them later on. It's just like the game. Trust me. And you said like 5 things that I do. There's 15 things that I've done. All right, more of them didn't work than did. so you got to keep going with that. But that's my entrepreneurial advice for sure.
Yeah, that's gonna make for a great social clip there. We'll say that because no, I mean it's so true. There's people act like this was my first idea or hockey wraparound was the first thing you ever decided you wanted to do, right? And no, there's a lot of things between idea and execution. I've always said it would be great if windshield wipers on cars had a bit of an ice blade on it so we could scrape the ice off without having to get out there and, do it ourselves. Just an idea. Haven't been able to execute that one. You got to
Right,
execute if you want things to happen.
right,
Uh,
right.
but the last thing here that we always ask, Lee, is just in general career advice for anybody looking to break into the hockey industry. What would you tell them?
Be patient. I think that one of the things, I don't like to look back in the past like, hey, well, this is what I would have changed. But I do know I was always in a rush to get higher, get further, get to the top. And I still think I could have done that by being more present, right? In the sense of that my work ethic wasn't going to change whether I had that panicked urgency or if I was really enjoying what I would do. And I think there were times that I didn't recognize where I was at and I didn't enjoy it. the way I should have enjoyed it, knowing that, hey, I'm working in professional sports or I'm working in hockey. And that's something I think that, especially when you're younger and trying to break in, you know, you cannot walk over people that way. Like, your team is very important. Who you work with is very important. Being present with what you're doing is very important. And remembering, again, I'm talking probably to the younger half of the audience. You're going to be doing this potentially for 40 years, right? You've got more time than you think, right? And try and enjoy the process and learn, right? Every step of the way, learn as much as you can, right? Learning is a skill. This is no different than I can talk to you as a coach, like for the players as a coach, right? It's true. Learn as much as you can. The ability to be present and to learn are superhero level talents. And the people that do that typically will find a way. All right. And then the last thing, Nick, I got to say it is, keep getting back up. Like, this is true of anything. Like, you're going to get knocked down. You're going to get laid off. You're going to have bad breaks. You're going to have a great idea and build a business, and then something's going to happen in the world and crush it. Get back up again. Especially if you're in that place right now, I'm telling you, you can do it. Get up. I believe in you. Don't lose that faith in yourself, right? Because that's the grit. That's the determination that pushes people through. But be present, always be learning, and it's hockey, right? Have the grit you need to keep getting back up.
Fabulous advice, not only in that response, but throughout the conversation here, Lee. Can't thank you enough for taking the time to share your journey, share some of the wins, share some of the losses, and everything in between. Tell people where they can find you if they have questions about what you're doing, or where they can find the podcast.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Look, if you want to hit me up, Instagram at Lee MJ Elias. That's where I do a lot of my team building work and inspirational work, and you can always message me on there. But the podcast is called Our Kids Play Hockey. You can get it wherever podcasts are heard, or ourkidsplayhockey.com. And then everything's the website, right? HockeyWraparound.com, Game7Group.com. All of it's in the same place. Twigbiscuit.com if you're interested in those stories. But find me on LinkedIn. If any of you have any questions, I'm always available to talk. If you listen to this episode, feel free to reach out. I mean that. I appreciate what you do so much, Nick. I mean that. To have this audience, but also to help grow the game is really a gift.
Thank you, my friend, for the time, the kind words, and guys, be sure to tune in next week for another edition of the Working in Hockey podcast.